let's do this then. Good evening. I would call to order the regular meeting of the Petersburg Borough Assembly here on Monday, September 19th, 2022. Clerk Thompson, would you please call the roll?
Jeff?
Here.
Bob? David?
Here.
Chelsea?
Here.
Thomas? Mark? Jay?
Here. Thank you. We have 6 people in chambers this evening, with Mayor Jensen being excused on his vacation. With that, let us rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag, United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of September 6, 2022 regular assembly meeting minutes. So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci and seconded by member Tremblay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The approval of those minutes passes unanimously. Item number 4. I would entertain any amendments to today's agenda, or I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as is. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a short under assembly discussion items, just a report on the Southeast Sea Otter Stakeholder Working Group. Just wanted to give a brief report on their quarterly meeting.
Sea Otter update during assembly discussion items. Got that, Clerk Thompson, in case I forget?
Yes.
Is there any opposition from the assembly to that? Okay, with that it is added. In that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda or to any other further changes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by member Mucci and seconded by member Tremblay. All those in favor say aye of approving the agenda.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? There are no opposed. We'll proceed with the Sea Otter update added to the agenda. This evening, we have a public hearing for ordinance 2022-12, an ordinance amending provisions of Title 17 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Safety Code Adoptions and Title 19, the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Zoning, to address tiny house dwellings, detached accessory dwellings, and multiple buildings on a single lot. Any public testimony regarding ordinance 2022-12 should be given during this hearing. Copy of the ordinance is in the packet. Is anybody here this evening to testify at this public hearing? Seeing no one in the queue, Clerk Thompson?
No.
Thought I should check. With that, the public hearing is closed. We have no bid awards this evening. And that brings us to persons to be heard related to tonight's agenda. Is anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to items on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I will transition to persons to be heard unrelated to tonight's agenda. Yep, please step forward, state your name and who you represent, and you get a full 5 minutes as per code.
You don't have to push it. It should just light up when you speak to it.
High tech in Petersburg. This is fantastic. Hi, my name is Rebecca Himshu and I'm over from Sitka. I'm a teacher in Sitka. I'm also running as an independent for House District 2. So I'm visiting Petersburg for the second time. First time was a bucket list item, Mayfest. And if you remember Mayfest this year, you had extraordinary weather. I brought that with me. I'm here again, and let's just take a look at that weather. So I am from Sitka. I've been there about 25 years. I've been teaching there 18. This is my 19th year teaching. I'm on a leave of absence right now to visit the rest of my district, which stretches from Yakutat all the way to Craig on Prince of Wales. I do not have Wrangell, but I do have Petersburg, and I feel very lucky to include Petersburg in the district. So living in Sitka, my family, my brother and his wife raised their kids in Dillingham. My niece is now here in Petersburg with her husband and their daughter. So we're rural Alaskans and we value rural Alaska. So I have come to Petersburg to get to know what people have on their minds here in town. And you can learn about me. I'll be doing some commentaries and I hope I have an event when I come back in October. Maybe some social media, local media. Door to door is the very best way I can get to know what people are thinking. And here's what I'm hearing so far. I'm hearing that we need to work on ferries. I know that we need to work on housing, daycare, early funding for schools, and you have a small hospital project on your radar as well. So those are the things I'm hearing about in Petersburg. I want to learn more from individual people here in town. I am leaving tomorrow, but I'll be back October 19th for about a week. and looking forward to learning more about the issues here locally at that time. I have felt very welcome in Petersburg. It's an incredible community. I was planning to speak for 3 minutes, but since you gave me 5, I'll go ahead and mention a couple of the things that I've noticed in town. I have felt a little bit of a fracture in your community. As I walk around and talk to people, there have been references to the hard times that we've all been through, and we've had those in Sitka as well. And I feel those fractures healing in Sitka, and I hope that's happening also in Petersburg. And I think we just have a whole lot more that brings us together. So when I look at various political signs in yards and that kind of thing, beyond the signs, I see boats, I see dogs, I see rain gear and all kinds of equipment that puts us outdoors in this incredible place where we live. It's my chosen home. For some people in Petersburg, it's been their home for generations. For some people, time immemorial. But at the end of the day, we're all here sharing something in common. And I think that's way more important than the problems that we have that we're solving maybe from different perspectives. So I will be back in Petersburg. I look forward to coming back, spending more time in town. Yeah, and that will be after October 19th. I hope to give a little bit more warning next time. And I've been to a lot of doors. I'll be to a lot more. And I really hope to hear from people what your issues are so that if I'm the person representing you in Juneau, I can take your concerns forward. Thanks.
Rebecca, one quick thing. If folks wanted to get a hold of you with questions, what's the best way?
Did I not give my number? I didn't give my phone number. There will be some flyers posted around town. Rebecca Himshoot is my name. It's hard to spell, but look on the flyers. And then you can also reach me at my phone number, which I intended to give. That's 907-738-6744. And I'd love to hear from folks.
Most excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks for asking.
Is there anyone else in the audience tonight who would like to speak to issues unrelated to the agenda? Seeing none, it is a slow night on a sunny night here, so we'll move on. There are no board, commission, or committee reports, and there is nothing on the consent agenda. In report of other officers, we have the Early Childhood Education Task Force update. Assembly Member Tremblay will be providing us an update to the Assembly on the the ECE Task Force activities. Member Tremblay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This will be part of the minutes for tonight's meeting, though it will be a better edited version because the Word document keeps transposing some names, and that's unkind to do to people. So it's a 2-page, I kept it short. It's only a 2-page report for you all today. The Early Childhood Education Task Force has had 8 meetings between June and now. We separated into 3 separate groups to tackle the 8 questions that the Assembly had tasked us with. And so those were broadly separated out into public access or brainstorming group. There's a staff and administrative support group, and there's a policy and details question, or policy and details group. And so the goal with those was to give people the chance to actually talk to each other, not just do an hour's worth of introductions and surface level stuff. So the first meetings, of course, were introductions and then solidifying our goals as set by the Assembly. Second meetings is when we started to get into the weeds a little bit more. For example, the access and brainstorming group, we've spent a lot of time talking about programs that used to exist in Petersburg or trying to figure out where the gaps were for different age groups. So an example of a pretty productive conversation that's coming out of that is we have historically had a Boys and Girls Club in Petersburg, and we found ourselves wondering, you know, what would it take to bring that back? And so we've had people from the task force reaching out to that statewide group, and it turned out that they were going to be starting to do some proactive outreach across Southeast Alaska. So we're getting ahead of that conversation, which is pretty fun. And so again, these are all very much ongoing conversations. So I'm going to keep it surface level just so I don't make any overt promises. So anyway, that's just kind of one of the trails that we're following. The staff and administrative support group, that group was made up of the people running the childcare facilities. And so as we can imagine, we're asking a lot of overworked people to do significantly more work. So for free. So I've been trying to not waste their time with meetings. So we had a meeting where we set our goal and looked over the incentive program put together or proposed by the Petersburg Community Foundation, based on the studies that they had been doing in the community, the survey and all that. And so that'll be something for the assembly to be learning more about. I have a call out to the representative from the Juneau Economic Development Council. They're the ones that have the hour-long presentation on their HEARTS program, which is what our program would be modeled after. And so I'll be getting back to the assembly on that question. When that date's been finalized, I'll be putting that out there and we'll be meeting. And then there's the policy and details question, because I mentioned we've been following different trails. People share what they're seeing in either their industry or in their government agency, and then comparing notes. And then that means that there can be some need for further investigation. And so that's where the policy and details group is really coming into play. That's, that specific state code, or that's this and that. And so, yeah, so we've been having fun with that. We researched a House bill that somebody had mentioned was an area of note, but obviously we're kind of holding a lot of that kind of research until the legislature starts back up again, because until we know the makeup and what people are interested in, there's no point in getting too into the weeds on that. But it was still a good way to be prepared for what might come in winter, because if it does get reintroduced, there might be some changes, and it'd be nice to know what was already proposed. And then finally, one of the meetings was what I was calling a family meeting, where we pulled a majority of the overall group together and set up how we would make decisions on spending, because there was money allocated by the assembly for this task force, and the question of whether each subgroup made a decision on money by themselves, or if it was the majority of the task force as a whole. We decided the majority of the task force was what made sense. Of course, those decisions would still come before the assembly, but ironing that out was kind of important. So we have some upcoming meetings in October. There's tentatively on the 10th, the 19th, and then the 20th would be the family meeting. I'm assuming that between now and then we will have had that meeting with to learn more about the the HEARTS program in Juneau. And so I just hope that we're able to keep in mind that what's happening in Juneau will be very different than what's happening here. So we might want to get lost in the weeds on specifically how it's funded and who's in support of it and all of that in Juneau, but that won't necessarily help us to understand how it would look here. So I know we love those kinds of details up here, but it'll be a good conversation. I'm looking forward to it. And then I just wanted to say, if anybody was listening to what I was just talking about and they don't think this conversation applies to them, they don't know why we're even talking about it, don't see what the big deal is, I would invite them to, the Share Coalition is presenting a movie that they made that Denver Rogers produced for them. It's October 1st from 9:30 to 10:30, and it'll be at the auditorium. And the film is highlighting the role childcare plays in the community and the issues that they face. The public is welcome to attend. There will also be a panel of individuals involved in the film and the caregiving industry here in Petersburg. And there will also be Tots Gym. An issue with childcare is you need to provide childcare sometimes to keep the conversation going. So Tots Gym will be open, and there will be care available for kiddos. So hopefully parents can come. And they're also hoping that people without kids, people who are out of this world but still live in this community, will attend and try to get a sense of the scope of what's been going on. And so again, that's separate from the task force. That's just what the Share Coalition has been working on. So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight all that work. And then I just wanted to really thank the borough staff, but especially Steve, has attended the vast majority of the meetings, and quite a few of the task force members. You know, people were assigned to one group, but some people have made a concerted effort to attend 3/4 of all of the meetings and to 3/4 to all of the meetings. And they're just really putting a lot of dedication into this. So open if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
Is that 9:30 at night or 9:30 in the
Morning.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. That's
It's a sleepover. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Other questions from Member Tremblay? Member Lynn?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for doing everything you're doing. Looks to me like there's been progress made, although, as I was told today, when you got into the details, there's a lot more details that people are bringing along. And the learning curve has been very steep is what I heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from Member Tremblay? Chelsea, thank you so much to you and the task force for your continued work, and I imagine you'll be keeping us posted and we'll keep at it. So thank you. You bet. On the agenda is standby generation project update. We're going to skip that for the evening because Utility Director Hagerman is unavailable to join us. Hopefully he'll be back in the mix soon to give the full assembly and update. So apologies to anyone who's tuning in just for that one. Stand by, more will be coming. That brings us to the mayor's report for today. The October 4th, 2022 municipal election. Absentee voting for this year's municipal election is being held in the training room of the municipal building Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. through September 30th, 2022. And then from 11 to 12 on Monday the 3rd, polls will be open on October 4th, Tuesday, 2022, in the activity room of the community center from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. For more information regarding the election, check out the 2022 election page of the borough's website or contact Clerk Thompson at 907-772-5405 or dthompson@petersburgak.gov. A link to the page is attached to this report, those of you who want to check it out online. Also, and back up on that. Everyone vote, please. Democracy is important. It's nice and easy. You can see Sally Dwyer, have a lovely chat, get your vote cast, or show up on October 4th. Critical to a thriving democracy, so please do. Also, we are seeking letters of interest for the Housing Task Force. The Petersburg Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community by joining a task force to research the housing problem in Petersburg. Citizens from the following groups are needed: lot developers, road builders, land surveyors, building contractors, engineers, real estate agents, Petersburg Economic Development Council members, Share Coalition, Petersburg Indian Association, Petersburg Medical Center, Petersburg School District, Petersburg Borough Assembly, and the public at large. So pretty much any and everybody is wanted. The Assembly shall appoint members to this task force at the October 3rd, 2022 Assembly meeting, and letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the Borough offices located at 12 South Nordic Drive by sending to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, AK 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And that concludes the mayor's report. I will pass it to you, Steve, for your manager's report.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Petersburg Triathlon Club is hosting a sprint triathlon on September 24th, which is a 500-yard swim, 10-mile bike, and a 3.1-mile run. Pre-race meeting is at 9 a.m. in the Aquatic Center back parking lot. Individual and group registration available online. Call or come in to chat with Scott Bird at Parks and Rec for more information. The park restrooms will be closing on Monday, October 3rd for the winter season. And Parks and Rec will be hosting another lifeguard certification course from October 14th through the 16th. You must attend all 3 days plus 6 hours of the online prior to the first day of the course. Contact Scott Burt at Parks and Rec if you're interested. We can always use more lifeguards. Parks and Rec Advisory Board will have a meeting in the upstairs admin office at Parks and Rec on September 29th at 4 p.m. Please feel free to join us or email us with any comments you would like to share via email. Parks Recreation Advisory Board at petersburgak.gov. Stephanie is working with various borough staff and the school to develop a plan for addressing the collapsed sewer lines in the community center. We got lucky and had Ketchikan Mechanical was in Wrangell, and we were able to pay their breakaway fee to come over and take a look at it. So we're hoping for more information on that soon. We had Mark Morris and Pete Anderson. That's the electrical engineer and the contractor that did a follow-up visit for the aquatic center repairs. Appears we will have to meet new code on the replaced electrical gear, which will involve moving and replacing additional equipment in the mechanical room. Basically, the original statement to the borough was that it could be built according to the code, the old code. They're now saying that's not the case. And so we're gonna have to move some stuff around. Unfortunately, the cost may be the borough's responsibility and may run up to $200,000 to do that. So it's, we're getting more information as we speak, and, you know, I'll keep the assembly informed as we learn more. Motor pool is starting prep work on our plows and winter equipment. And the mechanics are assisting a Caterpillar technician with a rebuild of the front brakes on one of our street department loaders. This project requires a major disassembly of the drivetrain to access the brake assemblies located inside the front axle gear case. Brakes were worn out from regular use, and we shouldn't have to replace them again during the service life of this piece of equipment. We're prepping our waste oil burners at the baler to get them ready for the heating season. And the water staff has been working with a local diver to develop a safe and sanitary method for cleaning the interior of our water storage tank. All aspects of the process and safety protocols have been reviewed by the operations staff, and we're hopeful that the tank can be cleaned soon. Wastewater department purchased a used tub grinder from Toke Wood Fuels, and it was delivered into the Haynes AML terminal on September 13th prior to its barge ride to Petersburg. The unit was in the budget and will cut staff time dramatically when producing chips for our composting program. McMillan Jacobs has advertised the Blind Slough Hydro project starting on September 16th. There will be a 2.5-month advertising period before the bids are due, and then a site visit for interested bidders will be scheduled for the week of October 24th through the 28th. We'll keep the assembly informed, and the assembly will need to award those bids when we get that far. Power and Light is working with Concrete Connection here locally to produce some testing blocks for the 1955 overhead crane at the Blind Slough Powerhouse. We actually have to have the crane load tested and certified prior to its use on the Blind Slough project. Library is hosting the Manhattan Short Global Film Festival Friday, September 23rd and Saturday, October 1st at 6:30 p.m. Tickets are on sale beginning October 17th at the library front desk. Friends of the Petersburg Libraries will hold a book and DVD sale October 1st from 11 to 1. Donations are welcome. It can be dropped off at the library. All proceeds from the sale support the local libraries. We're still looking for 2 resident assistants and a part-time nurse at assisted living. And we are having to replace a hot water heater at the manor that runs into the kitchen as well as the washing machines in the facility. I believe that's in process of being done as we speak. We're working on getting a new program for training the RAs to meet some new state requirements. And Jody and her staff worked with our auditors last week on the borough's annual audit process. And our chief will be attending the International Chiefs of Police Conference in Dallas from October 15th through the 20th. So wish him well in his travels. And that's it. Let's just questions.
Any questions for our manager this evening? Member Lynn.
Question for you, Steve, on the Crystal Lake. Once we get the bid in, Steve, what's the process you're going to use to determine which person we want to select if we have more than one?
Well, we'll have the engineer on the project, Ballot Jacobs, give us a recommendation, and you know, based on everything that's turned in, and then it'll be basically a group of us will be chosen. I don't know that Carl's made those decisions yet, but basically we'll evaluate the bids and make a decision on, you know, all of the things that go into a project, which is not just price, it's also expertise. This is kind of a unique project. We want somebody that's used to working here in Alaska and on some of these old hydro projects. So we'll see how it turns out, and we'll see what kind of bids we get.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the manager this evening? Steve, thank you so much, man. Oh, Member Kensinger, I apologize.
Could you explain exactly what happened at the pool with the collapse of the sewer pipe? Is it just old and needs to be replaced?
Sure, I can speak to that. So evidently about 20 years ago, 16 years, give or take, this is in the community center, so the older part of the building.
Right.
They did some sewer work very similar to this. They started seeing backups in those bathrooms and locker rooms down the hallway. And so they opened up the floor, jackhammered it out, and did about 10 feet of sewer line, that when they opened it up, they found that the sewer line had collapsed down. So basically they're hung on these little brackets, and then the top of the bracket is held in the cement. Well, these brackets evidently didn't make it to the cement. So over time, as the ground underneath the sewer lines fell, the pipes fell and broke. So we're assuming that that's what's happening again, but in a different spot. We don't know that until we open the floor up. We put cameras down all over the places we could, and they see blockages that don't appear to be stuff in the lines, but more so like the lines become detached or come apart. We're also taking fixtures off the walls so we can run a smaller camera through the fixtures to see the condition of those lines as well. My guess is it's just age. These are all old cast iron pipe. So over time, bad things happen to them. We won't really know for sure until we jackhammer the floor up is what it amounts to. We need to have a licensed plumber. That's why Ketchikan Mechanical is convenient. So they took a look at it. I think they ran their cameras down, and they're going to get back to Stephanie on kind of, what's their method? What do they recommend? Do we try to just do a little section and find where it may have fallen? Do we do just replace the whole line so we don't have to worry about this again? And what do we do about all the lateral lines that come from toilets and water sinks and all that? Do we use this opportunity to fix all those, or can they stay in where they are? And those are questions we don't know the answer to yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for that. Seeing no other further questions of the manager. Appreciate it, sir. Right on. That brings us to item number 14, unfinished business. Ordinance 2022-12, an ordinance amending provisions of Title 17 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Safety Code Adoptions and Title 19 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Zoning to address tiny house dwellings, detached accessory dwellings, and multiple buildings on a single lot. It's a second reading. If adopted in 3 readings, ordinance 2022-12 will establish standards to allow for tiny house dwellings, detached accessory dwellings, and multiple buildings on a single lot, applicable within Service Area 1 only. The Assembly unanimously approved this ordinance in its first reading. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Before we would open up to discussion, I was wondering if Director Cabrera could perhaps speak briefly to this for those who are tuning in for the first time, since this is a process you've been a part of for years now, if that'd be okay, Director Cabrera.
Sure thing. Let's see. So the ordinance will amend 3 different portions of code. Part A of the ordinance is an amendment to our building code adoption. So it adds Appendix AQ, which is specific to tiny houses. And basically all that does is provide some relaxation of our building code to accommodate the smaller sizes of houses under 400 square feet. So as an example, it lowers the minimum ceiling height in a home that's required. Under our normal building code at 7 feet. Under this amendment, if you build a house under 400 square feet, you'd only have to have 6 foot 8 inch ceilings. So it just very specific areas where it just tries to accommodate the needs of a tiny house and relaxes our building code. Part B is detached accessory dwellings. Unlike most places in the country, our single family zoning actually allows duplexes. So currently anyone that has single family zoned property actually has a by right use of being able to put a duplex on it. The caveat is that those duplexes have to either be part of the main building or attached in some way, sharing a common wall or attached through a breezeway. And most of the time, homeowners can accommodate that, but there are certain conditions where a homeowner wants to do something where the accessory dwelling, the second dwelling, is not attached to the house. They might want something in the backyard or an in-law or something like that. Maybe that's a little bit preferable. So this change to the code allows for the detached dwelling. It's a fairly conservative approach to detached dwellings. So you would not be able to do it if it really wasn't, if your lot wasn't large enough to accommodate it. So we're not going to allow variances. We're not going to let people put a house, a second house, you know, in the corner of the lot really close to the adjacent lot. You know, you're going to have to abide by setbacks. You're going to have to abide by maximum lot coverage, which is the amount of building you can have on each individual lot. Those things you're going to have to abide by for your district, and we won't be doing variances. It also requires that the house be smaller than the main building, your main house. So we don't end up with like a barracks looking neighborhoods, you know, so there's a real definite smaller dwelling on that property. The idea being that you want to keep the character of the established neighborhoods intact, even though you're allowing for this additional use. And the third part is specific just to multifamily zoned zoning districts. The current code envisions all multifamily structures to be in one building. So you can have an apartment building, but it doesn't envision having multiple small houses. So what this amendment does is allow you to do something like cottage housing, where maybe you have 5 houses on a single lot, but it doesn't change the number of dwellings you could have on a piece of property. So the density stays the same. It's just the configuration that changes and provides a little bit more flexibility for a property owner to develop their lot. I think that's all of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Liz, for running through that for those who have not been following the issue or those tuning in at home. Assembly discussion, Member Tremblay.
Thank you. Just while we have you, Liz, I had expressed concern in the last meeting about the issue of short-term rentals in this scenario, and I brought you those concerns. Do you mind sharing the answer that gave me a breath of calm on the issue of my question was, if you didn't remember, was I was concerned about whether short-term rentals would overtake any potential benefit to changing the code. And I brought that nervousness to Liz.
Through the mayor, Assemblymember Tremblay, I think the market in Petersburg is very different than where you see, for example, Sitka or Juneau. You know, we just don't have that incredible pressure of tourism that you might see in those other places. So even though maybe you'd see a little bit of an increase, I think the market would take care of it. You know, at some point, those aren't going to be profitable and worthwhile to do. And so I don't see an issue at the moment. And if things were to change substantially and we did see an issue, it's always, you know, then we would have information saying, hey, we saw, you know, 2,000% increase in short-term rentals, and maybe we should do something about that. But right now, I don't see it as a huge concern.
Thank you.
Member Lynn.
Thank you. Another question I'd ask you that we talked about had to do with the percentage of housing actually on a lot size. And that when we went to we changed and you went to the tiny houses, we did not change at all the percentage of the space that buildings occupies on a particular site. Am I right? And could you expand on that a little bit?
To the Vice Mayor. Assemblymember Lynn, correct. So none of these things will change the underlying requirements of the zoning districts. So in single family zoning, the maximum lot coverage is 35%. So none of this changes that. You can build on, you know, the way we look at it is cover under a roof up to 35% of your lot area. It doesn't change the number of dwellings that can be on a single family lot. You can already have 2. This isn't going to let you do 3 or 4 or 5 on a single family lot. The same thing for any of the other residential districts. It doesn't change the fundamental requirements of any of the zoning districts.
Thank you.
Further discussion from the Assembly. I'll chime in briefly since I wasn't here for the first reading. I'll definitely be supporting this in its second reading. Had a member of the public approach me this week and talked about how this ties into, you know, our housing shortage here in Petersburg and it, it doesn't in the context of we're not providing, mass housing. That said, though, I like that Director Cabrera did tie into the fact that it could make for, a quote unquote mill apartment or accessory apartment for family members you want close, but not too close. And, but also being, close to family. And I think that is a need, and, it was brought up when this first was brought before us years ago. And I think that need still does exist. In terms of some short-term rental opportunities, I also agree with what Director Cabrera said. If the market can't support it, we'll find out. But I think this is a great adaptation in code that I look forward to supporting. Further discussion from the Assembly, Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I think the answer to the housing problem is not going to be one solution. I think this change here is just a small step, and I think it's going to be a good step forward, and it's going to take many steps to kind of solve it, and looking forward to supporting this idea. So yeah, good job. Thank you.
Any further discussion from the Assembly? In that case, will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay, Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff, Chelsea.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously in its second reading, 6-0, and we'll be revisiting it again on October 3rd for its third and final reading. Item number 15, new business, ordinance 2022-13, an ordinance determining that property conveyed to the borough in a tax foreclosure proceedings shall not be retained for a public purpose and shall hereafter be sold. If approved in 3 readings, land conveyed to the borough in a foreclosure proceeding will be offered for public sale. Would entertain a motion to approve this in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion. Member Tremblay.
For anyone that doesn't know, what currently happens to property that is foreclosed upon?
Absolutely, go
I
ahead.
can speak to that. So if the taxes are not paid, we go through a notification process. And eventually, if we go through that process and the taxes are still not paid, we go through this foreclosure process. If it is sold at auction, then the first amount of money goes to pay the taxes. Anything left over will go back to the original property owner, and we just move forward. So if it doesn't sell, the borough ends up owning it as a piece of property and put it on our future list to sell.
And so for clarification, without this, it just becomes borough land and becomes up for open. If it stayed status quo right now, it would stay borough owned after all that process happens.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Member Tremblay. Any further discussion by the Assembly on this item? The clerk, please call the roll.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas, Jeff, Bob, David,
Yes.
Jay.
And that passes unanimously 6-0 in its first reading. Item B of new business, ordinance 2022-14. An ordinance updating the Borough Code to provide for elderly housing and assisted living directors at Mountain View Manor. Adoption of ordinance 2022-14 will create separate director positions for the Mountain View Manor Assisted Living and Elderly Housing Facilities. I would entertain a motion to approve this in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion has been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion. For those listening at home, Steve, I wonder if you could speak to this briefly. I could, but you'd be much more efficient than I.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So this is part of the cleanup language associated with the approval you gave at the last meeting to create the elderly housing director. We have various places in our ordinances that talk about different department heads. We need to split that out and show this. So it's basically outlining that we will have a elderly housing director.
Thank you, sir. Well said. Questions or discussion from the Assembly? Would the clerk please call the roll?
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob, Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously 6-0 in its first reading. Item C, Resolution 2022-14, a resolution authorizing the borough manager to pursue obtaining ownership of the Papke's landing facilities, including the dock, floats, launch ramp, associated tidelands, and uplands adjacent to the tidelands property currently owned by the state of Alaska. If adopted, Resolution 2022-14 will authorize the borough manager to pursue the ownership of tidelands and uplands located at Papke's Landing from the Alaska Department of Natural Resources. I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Lynn and seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion from the assembly. Member Kensinger.
Yes, basically what this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but we have to have this resolution to pursue upgrading Papke's. And I know a lot of you might have even seen the article and the pictures in the newspaper. And I want to emphasize to people that those are conceptual drawings, and you'll probably see a million reiterations of that before anything actually happens. So don't get excited if you don't like what you see. If you don't like what you see and you have some ideas that you'd like to change going forward, there'll be many opportunities, because to be quite honest, we don't have the money for this right now. So until that happens, there's nothing set in stone. But the main thing that happened when we redid the drawings was we expanded the area and took all the tidelands that DNR owns, and weren't just specifically having to just take the parcel that DOT was leasing from DNR. DOT is motivated to give this to us. We just have to work out the details. And there's many different pots of money that we might be able to pull from to build this project, but it's something that's probably going to take quite a few years before you see anything. But this is a first step.
Thank you, Member Kensinger. Further discussion from the assembly? Member Mucci, I saw your hand out there before in case you were hoping for it.
That's okay. I'll withdraw my hand.
Anyone else on the assembly want care to chime in on it right now? I'll briefly just chime in. This has been an issue before the assembly in varying ways through the years. I will not pretend this will be an easy process for you, Manager Giesbrecht. So I wish you luck, and I will be voting for this and navigating the various entities, and I'm sure you'll be keeping us posted. So thank you. Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea, Bob,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution passes unanimously on a 6-0 vote. Item D, Fire EMS Search and Rescue Director hire. Manager Giesbrecht requests the assembly approve the hire of Aaron Hankins as the borough's Fire EMS and Search and Rescue Director with a salary of $75K per year beginning October 3rd, 2022. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay and several others. Discussion. Member Tremblay.
Just I'm really grateful that you're going to be serving the community this way, and we are here to help you. We are all in this together, so thank you for your willingness to take on a probably very thankless job. So please know that we're here to help in this transition.
Well said. I would just briefly echo that. Aaron, I'll obviously be voting to approve this. By applying for this position, you've made your request clear to be of public service and public use. It's important to be of use to our community, and I thank you deeply for wanting to do this job. And as Member Tremblay said, we're all here to help, so I'm excited for you. Thank you. Any further discussion from the assembly? Clerk, please call the roll.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes. Congratulations, Aaron. Glad to have you. Yeah, I like that. Item E, subdivision cost estimation project. At the request of Manager Giesbrecht, Utility Director Hagerman has received a quote of $4,000 for P&D engineers to revise the cost of Fram and Hungry Point subdivision using a lesser construction standard. Another quote of $16K has been provided to estimate for 4 additional areas for subdivision development. Assembly approval will be needed to move forward with this project. I would entertain, how do we want to play this? Clerk Thompson, quick procedural question. Would you like us to take it as The 4 and the 16 or take them separately?
Maybe separately would be the way to go.
Do it that way. I'll follow your lead.
Okay.
So I'll start with, I would entertain a motion to approve 4K for P&D engineers to revise the cost of Fram and Hungry Point subdivisions using a lesser construction standard.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci and seconded by member Tremblay. Discussion on that particular thread of this. Member Kensinger.
Mr. Lynn.
Oh, member Lim, go for it.
Thank you. I'm gonna approach this from kind of the back door. Because median income right now in Petersburg, if you look at the last census, is about, of a family, is about $70,000 a year. At that, and if you go back and look at what a person can afford in terms of getting a mortgage for, it's about $240,000 a year, give or take. If you look at that and you go back and look at the lots, and I'm going to use the lots up at subdivision that we looked at, where we said to get power, sewer, water, and road to those lots is $130,000. If you put a modest size house of 1,200 square feet on that and I'm going to use it very conservative at $250 a square foot, you're well over, you're almost $500,000. The average medium income in Petersburg cannot afford those lots unless you have a willing somebody to help finance you. So I'm probably going to vote no on this. And the reason I say that is for two reasons. One is that getting more information on this, even if we reduce those costs, if that $130,000, use it for example, goes down to $90,000, you still can't afford, the median income cannot afford those lots. So I don't see us spending another $4,000 to get more detailed information on it till we, and the second part of that is we have agreed to form a housing task force to look at this. And what are we trying to solve? I've heard 4 different questions, but I don't know what we're trying to solve. So I'm not really for spending additional money right now until we allow the housing task force to form to decide what they're going to do. Let's hold the money till they come out with some objectives and then look at some of these things in more detail. I just don't think it's buying us anything to keep spending this money for more detail, when we haven't defined the problems we're trying to solve. And I really don't believe, looking at that, I don't think that the average person can afford the average median income. And if you're a single parent, oh my gosh, you're down at 40,000. You could not even begin to afford these lots. So I have to vote no on this.
Thank you, member Lynn. Further discussion from the assembly. Member Kensinger, you were on deck before.
Yes, I kind of concur with member Lynn. I think the need for housing in town is not, we know we have a need for housing, whether it's single lots, as member Lynn pointed out, most people can't afford it. I think probably once the task force convenes, we'll find out that we're going to have to scratch our heads and figure out how to get more land available that's cheaper. And there's several ways we can do that. There's a lot of lots that aren't built upon that already have water, sewer, and roads in town. And then we also need to take a look at, maybe we need to approach it from a different direction. Maybe we need more multifamily housing. Maybe we need more apartments. There's a whole range of things that we can do, but I would like to wait until we know that whatever we do, if we're going to develop any land of which we can give away, but if we're going to develop it, it's going to cost a lot of money, and most people won't be able to afford to even pay the cost of developing the land and put a structure on it with the numbers like member Lynn pointed out. So I'd like to wait and not spend any more money until the task force meets and we get some direction from that task force.
Thank you, member Kensinger. Member Tremblay, I saw you on deck. You're up.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'd like to thank the manager and Director Hagerman for following the trail that we set you on. And thank you for your patience, as it seems like we're going to redirect you, because I think that Member Lynn had really great insight, and the way he laid it out was very helpful as far as getting our head around the scope of the kinds of projects that we're talking about happening up there. And I think when we started this train of thought, it was pre-housing task force formation. It was maybe even pre-hospital work session, or it was concurrent with that hospital work session, as we're waiting for them to be finding out details from their surveying of around that same area. So I'm excited to see what those different conversations have to bring forward, and hopefully there might be some progress on this issue through those areas. And we can, yeah, it seems prudent to just press pause on this. So yeah, thank you to everyone for productive conversations.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be voting for this. Earlier in the meeting, we talked about changing the ordinance or the code to put small houses on and different things on lots in town. And I mentioned it was a small step in looking at some of the problems and housing that we have here in town. And I think it would behoove us to move forward with this. We know this conversation is going to continue, whether or not the housing task force, they want to look at it, but eventually we're going to have to be looking at additional subdivisions in town. And this will just fuel the conversation from some of the folks that we deal with on a regular basis, the contractors, builders, road builders, that the borough is not doing enough for, to at least look at different subdivisions in town. And by putting this off, I think it's just going to kick the can down the street and not really address a problem that needs to get looked at. I mean, I think all those subdivisions, they're expensive to do. I think we've answered the problem of what it's going to, or the question of what it's going to cost to do these subdivisions and estimate. But I think we continue to just move forward, and you know, we are giving direction to the task force. We will set their parameters on what we'd like them to look at, as well as what they want to do. But I think by kicking this can down the road, it's going to give, people are going to be a little disappointed that we're not moving forward with this. So I'm going to be voting for this. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Mucci. Member Fine Walsh.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Member Mucci just said. I feel like this is overall, you know, as Member Lynn said, that there are a lot of questions here, and these lots are expensive. But I mean, we're talking about subdivision developments that are in the multiple millions, you know, when all is said and done. So to talk about $4,000 to get a little bit more insight into the project, that seems like a drop in the ocean, frankly. And you know, whatever the task force comes out with, eventually we're probably going to want to know what it's going to cost and what we're going to, I mean, we have an island and we're not getting smaller. The idea is to become larger as a community. We're going to have to grow. People need to be somewhere. And that brings me to the other issue. These are expensive lots, sure. And, you know, as has been pointed out multiple times, the housing crisis is multifaceted. Everyone is suffering under the housing crisis. So nobody can find houses, and that affects, you know, people on kind of every level. And I think if we can alleviate pressure anywhere, that will be good for the system overall. If you know, if people want to come up to Petersburg and work in our hospital, or they want to work in our processing plants, and they have access to capital to build, you know, maybe they couldn't build a, you know, a $9 million house in Seattle, but they can build, you know, a $500,000 house in Petersburg. We need to give them lots to do that, because they would come here. And I think they would love to like become a member of our community, and we should attract people like that. I don't see why, you know, we wouldn't invest a little money to see if we can do that. Doesn't mean we're foreclosing. You know, if we spend $4,000 to do this, does that mean we have to just suddenly stop examining every other aspect of this problem? Certainly not. We have the resources and the money to, you know, approach this on every level. So, you know, I think it's worth doing. You know, and frankly, I brought this up when the idea of a task force was first broached. I feel like that's a dereliction of our duty as an assembly. I mean, we were elected by the people of this community to deal with this problem. I don't see why we're passing it off to a task force. We have the resources, we have the access. You know, this is why we're spending our time doing this. doesn't make sense to kind of bring other people in. I think if we want, outside expertise from individuals in the community, we can organize work sessions and we can get that expertise. And then I think we're in a position to, move forward. So, that said, granted, I think it's great to get the community involved. But again, I don't see why we can't spend $4,000, get this information and still have a task force. Give the information to the task force. Like I said, this is property we're gonna want to develop eventually, whether we pay to, get the information now or we pay later. What does it matter? At least this way the task force would have the information. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents. I'll be voting for this.
Thank you, Member Fine Walsh. Member Kinsinger, go right ahead.
Yeah, on reconsideration, I mean, basically the $4,000 are going to go in there. They're going to tell us how much it's going to cost to float a road versus digging all the way down to hard pan.
Through the mayor?
Of course.
That's part of it, yes. So instead of building a 26-foot road, we'll build a narrower road. We won't dig out all the muskeg, so we'll float the road. We'll put utilities under, we'll put a solid base under the utility lines so that they don't have a problem breaking in the future, but we won't put a solid base under the whole road is what it amounts to. So narrow the trench of the utilities, narrow the road, and float it rather than, digging it all the way down to hard pan. So that's what the 4,000, and I can tell you what Carl said and what the engineer said, which is on those 2 projects, probably could see some significant reductions in the cost doing that because so much of it is the rock work. So to know what that is, that was what the $4,000 is, to go back and look at the Fram Street and the Hungry Point and see, what would, if we narrowed that, those requirements, what would that do to the cost? So that's, I can speak to the other ones when you get to that point, but the 4,000 was specifically to do a little bit lesser construction, still perfectly legal. Many of our roads in town are built the same way. Have to say, one of the challenges with doing that is that those roads then become more maintenance intensive when you don't take them down to hard pan. But it's a way to understand better what that was going to cost us.
Follow up. Go ahead, Member Kinsinger.
So my understanding is the airport subdivision that we went in with Clinket and Haida, that was built with the lower standard of what we're going to be looking at? Or was that subdivision put in with the standard of what our estimate was?
Now, Clinket Haida is actually put in to a higher standard than what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if we get the development costs for an area, let's say at some point in the future, we wanted to have those lots combined to be multifamily housing, 0 lot lines or whatever, we just determine that the market needs, then this isn't money we've thrown away. You still have the same cost for developing the area. You might just divide the lots up in a different fashion.
Through the mayor. Yeah, I mean, you might have more utility connections, which can change the cost. You may have more driveways in some sense that may change things. I mean, there's always variables that will change, and then time will change things. We've all seen what the cost of supplies. So the longer time goes on, we'll see inflation in those costs. On the other hand, we'll have, I think several of you, I used the example, we'll have our book of information that can be used by various groups. We have, we have contractors come to us all the time. Why don't you do this? And we haven't really had a great answer. Doing these estimates gives us a chance to say, well, this is why, this is what we're seeing. And do you think you can do it cheaper? So there are some advantages to having this data ahead of time. It's not the end of the world. We've already done some of them and can use those as examples. But speaking to the 4,000, the motion on the table, that's about just taking a specific look at those 2 subdivisions, narrowing the construction standards a little bit and see what that does to the price.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll be supporting it.
Before I give you the floor, Member Lynn, I figured I should speak to it since the rest of us have. Yeah, I will be supporting this and I'll line out why. I don't disagree with anything Member Lynn said before in terms of, wanting to greater define what our goals are here, but as Member Fine Walsh said, 4K is a drop in the ocean on this, and I know it's real money and I'm not trying to minimize that. But for Fram and Hungry Point, we will have utility work that needs to be done up there in the future anyway, correct, Mr. Manager? Yep, just to make sure I wasn't putting my foot in my mouth. So these are areas we're gonna be doing some work anyway. And like you said, the book of information. My street, I live on 7th. It's a floating street. You know, Excel is next to me. It needs a lot of grading. It does. Like it's also a high traffic street. But as far as giving us a baseline for other options, I think we have to. I mean, obviously if the assembly votes no, we vote no. But I'm inclined to spend $4K for more viable information in terms of how we can develop lots. On a simple level, I'm a believer that more information is better than less, and a 4K for those two areas, because Fram and Hungry Point are viable subdivision areas. I want to add more information to the book, so I'll be voting yes on this. Member Lynn, you were waiting, go right ahead.
Thank you. There's two other pieces here that we just did some work, you know, and paid for, that did probing and looked at those sites up there. And so did the hospital, just do the same work and get the reports. Those two reports haven't come together. We haven't shared those. Reports haven't been shared yet. So that has to be done, in my estimation. The second point we looked at and I've talked with Carl about that I'd dearly love to have the answer to is that, yeah, we can put more subdivision there. But when we look at our sewer and water lines that come from downtown to those areas, there's a very serious question of whether or not we have the capacity to be able to tie those into the other ones. So the question in my mind is much bigger. And so we spend $4,000 for detailed information here, but yet we have this line that runs all the way downtown that's going to cost us $4 or $5 million to replace. I mean, yeah, it's a drop in the bucket. Don't disagree with anything anybody says. But I think there's a bigger question here that I'd love to save some of our money and to be able to look at this when we get, you know, when all this information comes together. And we can share between what the hospital did, what we did, and Carl comes back and we have a chance to look in more detail at what needs to be done, tie this all together. That's bottom line, my reservation. Well, I'd like to hold off, you know. Yeah, we could jump and move now, but I'm still of the mind to hold off. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lynn. Any further discussion from the Assembly? Member Tremblay.
Just a moment of gratitude. I love the level of detail and thoughtfulness everybody's putting into this topic. So even when it seems like it's going to be a split vote, a moment of thanks for some people might be listening to this totally bored, but this has been the level of questions that have to go into all of these things is really quite remarkable. So yeah, just thank you.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. Member Mucci, did I see you out there?
Oh, no, thanks.
You're gonna withdraw, fair enough.
No, thanks.
Right on it, we'll leave you hanging. Any further discussion from the Assembly? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on the $4,000 for P&D engineers to revise the cost of the Fram Street Hungry Point subdivision using a lesser construction standard?
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
David,
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1 with Member Lynn voting no, which brings us to the subplot of this. I would entertain a motion to approve another quote of $16K provided to estimate 4 additional areas for subdivision development. Is
So
that a good way to phrase it, Clerk Thompson?
yes.
Cool. Motion been made by Member Mucci. Was there a second or did I miss it?
Second.
And Member Kensinger seconded. Good, I didn't miss it. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. I may
Absolutely.
be able to help a little
Do
bit
it
on
up.
this one.
Yes, please.
So these are 4 different places, different parts of town. And the one, I can tell you that likely 3 of the 4 are going to be more expensive than everything you've seen so far. So if you want to talk about not doing those, for example, doing Frederick Road all the way out to the creek will be very, very expensive. Okay, so I think it's worth doing, by the way, but if the money is an issue, you might want to consider dropping those. The 8th Street is that, Liz, do I got that one right? The 8th Street is the multifamily one. So this was Liz's idea, and it's probably the best of those 4 by a wide margin, which is smaller development right on the road. I think it's worth looking at that for sure. The others were to add to the book, so to speak. So anyway, I just wanted to spell that out, that of those 4, the 8th Street, I really would highly recommend the assembly, allowing that to go forward. The other 3 are going to be more expensive than what you already looked at. Again, valuable information that you may,
Member Kinsinger.
And my understanding is we're paying for this out of the property development fund?
Yes, sir. We currently have 800,000 in the property development fund. That's where we use it.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Member Kinsinger had the floor. No further discussion. Member Lynn, floor is yours.
If we wanted to modify, and I can make a motion to do it, to just do the 8th Street proposal and to leave the other 3 out. Again, simply because it's going to be much more expensive. If you're going to put priorities in our borough, it wouldn't be those sites. It would be the other sites that we've already looked at as I see it. So I'd move that we just look at the 8th Street site.
That's the amendment.
That's
All
my
right,
amendment.
that is, the amendment. Is there a second to that amendment to hold the other 3 and pursue the 8th Street development?
I'll second it.
Motion has been made and seconded by Member Tremblay on the amendment. Discussion specifically to the amendment. Member Tremblay.
Thank you. Could you please speak, Manager Giesbrecht, to just the efficiency question of, are we hiring somebody to come to town no matter what? And so they would do just the 1 instead of all 4. And so if they did the other 3 later on, we'd have to pay costs again.
I can't, through the mayor.
Of course.
Actually, we're using P&D for a reason, because they know town so well. So Carl was doing all of the Muskeg depth himself. So it was our own staff that was doing that. P&D was doing this from their talking to local contractors, basically doing it out of their office. So they were not making a visit. The one advantage to doing it now is because they've got a whole bunch of current information that they've gathered to do these other subdivisions. So that's, they've talked to local contractors to find out what they're charging for things. And that's helpful, but it's not gonna stop a trip because we're not having to bring them here.
Thank you.
Member Kinsinger.
So basically, this would give us a baseline of information of all the potential areas that we could likely subdivide. Not that we'd want to do it, but just get a placeholder and just get a rough idea how much it's going to cost to do it.
Through the mayor, yes. I mean, there's clearly other places, but they come with many more other problems. These combined with the earlier group was the best that we could pick out, at least for the moment.
Any further discussion specific to the amendment? I'll chime in on it. I'm actually going to be voting no on the amendment. I think there is value in all 4 of those. 16K is not to be sneezed at, but when we're talking about money coming specifically from the property development fund, which currently has approximately 800K in it, I like this for even this longer term information on how we can create different levels of housing and lot development in our community. So I don't want to remove the other 3 at this point. So I'll be voting no specific to the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Member Fine Walsh.
I'll just chime in and say more or less along the lines of what I said earlier. Based on the cost of this, I think the information is worth it. Especially as we're in a situation where we're under some pressure with regards to housing, and we're potentially looking at a political environment where a fair amount of money may be available for infrastructure development. So the more information we have in our hands, I think the better. We may be in a better position to get some help. So yeah, I think the more information, the better. I'll be voting for it. Oh, sorry, against it.
Member Mucci. Okay, any further discussion, again, specific to the amendment? The clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Chelsea,
No.
David,
No.
Jay,
No, sorry.
Thomas,
No.
Jeff,
No.
Bob,
Fails on a 1 to 5 with member Lynn voting for. Back to the motion as a whole to approve 16K for additional subdivision development for other places. Further discussion on the main motion. Member Michi,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
you bet.
Yeah, this is, like I've said earlier in the meeting, these are just small steps in addressing some of the housing issues in Petersburg. I'm hoping that sometime in the near future, these maps can be on the Borough website for people to take a look at. But, like the Papke's dock facility and the parking lot out there, we are moving forward in getting shovel-ready projects on the books so that in case there is some funding available for infrastructure development, we can say, yes, we have this in the shelf. And so, while I know 16,000 is a lot of money, I think it's like somebody said earlier, we have $800,000 that we put away for projects like this. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this. I think it's a good use of our borough money. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Michi. Member Tremblay, I saw you with your hand out.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be voting for this. I still think Member Lynn's points about the costs of developing a lot of this are going to be prohibitive for people if we do things conventionally. And I'm hoping that we are able to be creative and problem solve and partner our way through in unconventional ways to help make sure that this kind of development hopefully could be affordable to the typical family here in town. And so I think the more information we can gather, the better to help future decision makers, whoever those are. And so I'll be voting in support of this.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. Any further discussion on the main motion from Assembly members? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Thomas,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
Chelsea, Jay,
Yes.
Jeff, David.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion passes 5-1 with Member Lynn voting against. Bringing us down to item F. Pump Station 4 Force Main Project Engineering Contract Amendment. Utility Director Hagerman requests approval to amend P&D Engineers contract for the Pump Station 4 Force Main Project. Oh, lost it there. Force Main Project to include Task 2 work items on a time and material basis for amount not to exceed $53,919. P&D's Task 2 proposal is attached. I would entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved. Second.
Motion been made by Member Lynn and second by Member Mucci. Discussion. Member Mucci, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I
You
wonder
bet.
if we could get a brief explanation from the city manager about what this is for the folks at home. Thank you.
Through the mayor, I'll try.
Yeah. That's fine.
So the force main at Pump Station 4 has been a project on our books for quite a while. We put it aside during COVID because of just various things. And we brought it back out recently. We had some local folks who thought potentially we should look at Hungry Point as it may offer an opportunity to reroute some of the work on the force main to also get a subdivision out of it. That was one of the first estimates we got. It's one of the estimates we're going to go back and take a look at to see how the at a lesser standard what that should look like. But in the meantime, we've had our engineer take a look at this, and we've got to kind of get moving on the force main project as far as the specific force main project as compared to some of the potential other options. So this is to pay P&D for some of their engineering work. And it'll come together with some of these other estimates if in fact we come back to the assembly to say, okay, we're going to reroute this. One of the things about rerouting it is the costs go up dramatically. So we're not really prepared to make that recommendation yet. We kind of need to see the rest of this engineering done by P&D before that can be an option. But this is paying P&D to do some more engineering on a project that's kind of well overdue to get done.
Thank you, Steve, for the explanation. Did that answer your question, Member Mucci?
Yes, thank you.
Member Lynn?
Yeah, Steve, that also changes, if I remember what Carl was telling me, the volumes of which goes through that pump station are increasing. And if we, depends on how they change it, with that other one. The purpose of the engineering is to look at significantly increased volumes that we have to deal
We
with.
have to look at all of that,
Yes.
including potentially for subdivisions.
Yeah.
And we have to get some of this base stuff done before any other future decisions are made. And we have to move forward on the force main project in total. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Further questions, Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because the other idea with this project here, or maybe not the project, was to tear up Nordic Drive and come around the corner.
Hmm.
And so that would be a great disturbance to that neck of the woods. And this would give us the opportunity of opening up, potential more property to sell. It's also been brought up to me that, has it ever been any thought brought into running that force main up that road to the current wastewater treatment plant? Continue on then?
I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you very
Sorry.
much. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff, Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea.
And that passes unanimously 6-0, which brings us into communications. All correspondence received since September 1, 2022 is available for perusal on the Borough website. We have 3 assembly discussion items. I'll start with item A, the 2022 ballot propositions. Vice Mayor Stanton Greger, meaning me, requests a discussion to clarify the 3 ballot propositions on this year's municipal election ballot. Before I turn it over to Clerk Thompson to explain it, I went in, I voted early like I tend to do, and I was going through the ballot initiatives, and I approved these to be on the ballot and have thought about them for a while, and I realized, oh, these are kind of confusing. So someone who hasn't been paying close attention, it might behoove us to kind of give an overview to the general public. So without further ado, I'll pass it to you, Clerk Thompson, and thank you.
Thank you. So just for everyone's information, when you do vote, either early or on election day, on the information table, there will be 3 ordinances. And these 3 ordinances have to do with the 3 propositions. So if you have specific questions about why they're in front of you, it's a little boring, but the ordinances do tell you why. So I'll go through first ordinance 2208, which relates to proposition number 1. In our current charter, there's a section called services to be provided only by service area. And so as most of us understand, Petersburg Borough has currently 1 service area 1, and that is basically the old city limits is service area 1, now minus Frederick Point East properties. And everything outside of service area 1 is just outside of service area 1. They do not have a service area of their own. So this section of the charter states that collection of solid waste and water, sewer, and electric services are only to be offered within a service area. So I guess what that means is basically if you don't live inside of service area 1, we're not supposed to be collecting your garbage or providing electric service. Well, we're doing these things. And I think that when the charter was written, you're writing such a big document that you can't think of every situation. So in this instance, it doesn't make sense for someone who purchases a lot outside of service area 1 to build a home. They put a pad and they need just to run an electric service from the highway where the electricity is down to their lot. It doesn't make sense that they need to create a service area in order to get that service done. This is something they will be paying for personally out of their pocket so that they can build a home. These are things we already do. We also pick up garbage out the road. So we would like to change the charter to actually match what we do. So the question that's on the ballot states, shall section 14.02A of the Petersburg Borough Charter be amended to provide that creation of a service area is not required where the extension of water, sewer, electric, or solid waste collection to a property is requested and will be paid for by the property owner. So it'll just make it so that the charter matches what we're doing right now. For instance, though, a time when there should possibly be a service area created outside of Service Area 1, let's say the people around the Packy's Landing area decided they wanted their own fire station. There's an example of where the people can come together, create a service area, maybe pay a little bit more on their property taxes in order to fund this fire station. So it's kind of a totally separate thing. Did that help on that one, or did
No,
I
it's
just
great.
confuse it?
No, Clerk Thompson, that's great. I mean, if I'm hearing you right, the bones of it is the services we're providing anyway, and this, like you said, makes the charter consistent with our actions.
Yes,
There we go. Number 2.
okay. So ordinance 2209 deals with proposition number 2. This proposition is trying to correct an oversight, I believe, in the charter. So it's section 19.03. It's called personal financial interest and nepotism, and I'll read it as currently written. Prohibition: an elected borough officer may not participate in any official action in which the officer or a member of the officer's household has a substantial financial interest, unless after disclosure of the interest, the officer's participation is approved in a public meeting by the majority of the assembly. So that all works if you are a member of the assembly. But what if you're a member of the hospital board and you declare a financial interest in something they're deciding? Should that board not make a decision on that until it comes before the assembly in a public meeting? That doesn't make sense either. Really, that decision should be made by the board in which the member or the person is a member. So our thought is to change that wording from the assembly to shall section 1903A of the Petersburg Borough Charter be amended to provide that when an elected borough officer discloses a substantial financial interest in a matter before the board on which the officer sits, that board shall consider and address that member's conflict of interest.
Just a brief clarification or to summarize, this would allow hospital board, P and Z, et cetera, to handle their own business,
Correct.
to put it simply. Yeah, Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to why I found this one really important, because I have a feeling that right now, if a issue like that were to come up to a board, I could imagine a temptation by an individual in that situation to simply not say anything because it would overcomplicate the conversation and they just have business to do. So they would just simply keep business moving, but not disclose their own conflict of interest. And so this seems important to me. So I'm glad it's on the ballot, and thank you for speaking to it so clearly. So I think people understand that it does provide actually more upfront disclosures and helps business move along more efficiently.
Sure, and I would like to add that if there is any board out there where this comes up and they aren't sure whether they should allow the member to vote, they can certainly bring it to the borough and we can help deal with the situation.
There we go. Number 3.
Okay, ordinance 22-10 deals with proposition number 3. This proposition basically is about personal interest. Right now, the charter says that borough officers, employees, and elected officials shall not be eligible to sell, barter, or supply anything to the borough or purchase anything from the borough while holding office or employment, or for a period of 6 months after leaving office or employment, unless an invitation to submit sealed bids is published. Well, we started thinking, why only sealed bids and not public outcry auction? If we're selling a piece of property and it's outcry auction and everyone is in the room, why is it that a borough employee or administrative officer or whatever can only bid if it's sealed bid? What is the difference? We didn't really see a danger in the outcry auction of favoritism. I'm not sure how that would even happen. So we're throwing it out there. We believe that we should be able to, everyone should be able to bid either way. Competitive, what was it called? Sealed bids or outcry auction. Yes, thank you. So the question, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, keep going. You're good.
Okay, so the question on the ballot now states, the Petersburg Borough Charter currently allows borough officials and employees to participate in sales of borough property when those sales are conducted by competitive sealed bidding. Shall the Petersburg Borough Charter be amended to additionally include sales held by competitive outcry auction?
Yep, 'cause, yeah, they can do sealed bid already, so giving the public the option to include outcry auction involved also.
Correct.
Clerk Thompson, appreciate you. For those listening at home, I hope that was helpful because they're all on the ballot. Right on. We'll move it on to item B, Frank Murkowski Transportation Proposals. Assemblymember Kensinger request to discuss a possible presentation / community discussion regarding Frank Murkowski's transportation proposals. The floor is yours, Member Kensinger.
Yes, at Southeast Conference, I had a lengthy discussion with former Governor and Senator Frank Murkowski. And as part of that discussion, he offered to come to Petersburg and present his proposals. So if it is okay with the Assembly, suggested this Thursday. He's currently living in Wrangell till the end of the month, and then he heads south for the winter. So he would fly over on the morning plane, have a presentation about 1 o'clock Thursday, and then head back on the afternoon plane. Frank, the former governor, was of course, the last time there was an in-depth transportation study done, was completed in about 2002, 2004, when it finally got adopted. And a lot of his proposal that he wants to present deals with that. There's quite a bit in that I will warn people that they might not like. But the concept is one that I've supported and worked on for quite a few years, is developing a point-to-point ferry system in addition to our current mainline system. So right now we have a unique opportunity, mainly thanks to his daughter, our current Senator Lisa Murkowski. She put, for the first time ever, $1 billion in the infrastructure bill for operation funds for the Marine Highway System. It wasn't the intent for that money just to supplant state money for operations. It was hopefully to be a bridge so that we could figure out what we want to do with transportation going forward in the future. And there's also a very significant amount of money in that bill for also constructing new ferries. But it takes a long time to do that. And my fear and the governor's fear is that if we don't get moving, if we don't get this on the radar of people in Southeast Alaska, 5 years is going to go by awful fast. And we'll still be stuck with the Matanuska, which will then be 67 years old, and the Columbia, not as ancient, but close to it, and the Kennecott, which they're going to have to spend $140 million on it and do a major upgrade if they want to keep that thing going. So there's big amounts of money. So anyway, Governor Murkowski just wants to start the conversation. So with your indulgence, I'd like to invite him over and do it this Thursday at 1.
Well, from an assembly action perspective, it's a discussion item, and that's something we can take a formal stance on since it wasn't advertised accordingly. But I see, and Clerk Thompson, as always, correct me if I'm missing, I see no problem from an informal Dave Kensinger assembly member, invites over. Am I on good footing with how I went there?
You are. I think that Member Kensinger wanted to discuss it to see if there was any direct opposition for any reason, just to see how you all felt.
About right, Member Kensinger?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys have major heartburn with it, I'll pull the invitation away.
Roger, I oppose that in no way, shape, or form. Any further, Member Tremblay?
Yeah, just the more conversations on ferries, the better. So I don't know if I'll make it. I might be working, but I look forward to hearing about the notes from the meeting.
Likewise. Further discussion from assembly members? Thank you, Member Kensinger. Appreciate it, man. And
Okay,
keep us
so
posted.
we'll invite him. It'll be this Thursday, 1 o'clock here in the Assembly Chambers it's open to anybody in the public, anybody that's interested in talking about ferries.
1 p.m. this Thursday.
I will warn you, Governor Murkowski has very strong opinions.
Discussion the better. All right, thank you, Member Kensinger. Item C, Member Mucci, Sea Otter update. I'm butchering the title of your discussion, but the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet.
On September 8th from 9 o'clock until noon, we had our quarterly meeting of the Southeast Alaska Sea Otter Stakeholder Working Group. As the title says, we meet quarterly. Of particular interest, and the notes will be out here the next week or so, and I'll make sure I forward them to you, is the interest to me is that last year they tried to do a sea otter survey in all of Southeast, and the weather was kind of crummy and didn't get accomplished. And this year they were able to get it done, and they flew from Cape Yakataga to Dixon Entrance, and they are very confident that they counted pretty much every otter in Southeast Alaska. And they have a couple ways of using artificial intelligence to back up, to look at their pictures that they took in several different cases, and they can separate otters and pups, rocks, kelp beds, and it's very, very, very informative to me. And on another note, I noticed in the news that Washington and Oregon are trying to reintroduce otters to their coastline. And I'm thinking to myself, we're trying to manage them here in Southeast Alaska or Alaska, but we're trying to introduce them in Washington and Oregon. So I'll have more information once the notes are out, but I just wanted to share that. So thank
Thanks.
you. Mr.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Member
Yeah, thank you.
Mucci. I look forward to checking the
Yeah.
notes, so that's pretty intriguing stuff. Member Lynn.
Member Mucci, what, once that information, they got that and they refined it, where's the intent? Is there did that go into a management plan, or what's the next step, I guess, what I'm asking?
Well, they're very careful not to address it as a management plan because it's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that manages it. They're trying to identify the impacts on communities in Southeast Alaska and to see if there's adverse effects on communities and what they can do to maybe counter those effects. They don't want to be viewed as a harvesting arm. They want to see what they can do to look at the impacts that are coming to these communities and seeing if there's options out there. The big sticking point to this whole thing is that it gets looked at for the walruses out west. That's the driving force between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with, and once they've established what they can do with walruses and polar bears, then they think they might be able to address something going on with sea otters in Southeast. So it's just a long glacial process, similar to the Borough process. So it's just listening in and appreciating the info. So yeah, thank you. Hope I answered your questions.
Answer the question, Member Lynn? Right on. Thank you, Member Mucci. Look forward to the update.
Yep.
Brings us down to Assembly Member comments. Member Lynn.
Just for information, I'd like to attend with Frank Murkowski, but I can't because I have an all-day SEPA meeting on Thursday. And while I'm on that subject, I think there's two items that I think will be of interest. Is that one of them is to award a contract to an outside firm to take a look at our power needs in Southeast Alaska. What is expected to happen, say, over the next 10, 15 years? Our power here, we've been increasing at about a 3% rate each year. Our Ketchikan higher than us and so forth. And so what they're also going to do is to look at what they call interruptible power needs. And what that is where you have a cruise ship come in and it ties up the power for a certain period of time that you can pay for that. And can you accommodate, so what is going to be the impact if you accommodate it during the times that those ships are in harbor? And would that add to the amount we collect? And would that bring us to a point later on where we can bring another hydro resource online quicker, some of those. And the intent is to even look broader, is to look at cake and look at some of the other options that we've been asked to do as part of that. But the power needs, what's interesting in there is the impacts of going to electric cars with some of the new bills and so forth. Looks like it's going to have some major impacts here on us. And then that affects coming back locally. That will affect, Caro and what we can do and what our power needs are here and our generator needs are. But anyhow, that's one of the items that's on the agenda for discussion that I'll bring back next time.
Thanks, Member Lynn. Look forward to the update. Any other Assembly member comments this evening? Oh, wait, Member Fine Walsh, that's you.
I just wanted to mention, I had the opportunity to attend the Southeast Alaska Conference with Member Kensinger and Director Cabrera here recently. And we had a great time. It was a really exciting conference, and it was just really inspiring to see everyone from all over Southeast Alaska together as the region sort of emerges from COVID. And you know, there's tremendous growth across the board and a lot of excitement. And it was cool to be a part of that. And a couple key takeaways for me from it that I wanted to share with whoever's listening. One was plans to expand the Petersburg and Wrangell airports are hopefully again underway. There was talk about doing something like that prior to COVID, and that kind of reset all of Alaska's plans. And now that they've kind of got their business together, apparently that's back on the priority list. So I personally was really excited about that because I can't believe I'm alone in thinking that the experience in the Petersburg airport is like, I feel like I'm in a clown car sometimes going through security there. It's ridiculous. And not to mention, I think there are legitimate safety concerns with the way, you know, people in traffic spill out into the road, you know, especially now that we have the larger airplanes there. I think Alaska's cognizant of that. I do believe that the Assembly could help speed the process along, you know, is not to be pushy or anything, but it's something that's really important to the community. And I think we should make sure that Alaska understands, you know, that we're really excited about this. Another thing that I want to share was a company in Ketchikan that is producing leafy greens using hydroponics in shipping containers. They're apparently doing quite well. They sell out everything, you know, within minutes of announcing sales in Ketchikan, which is admittedly a slightly larger community than Petersburg, but I thought that was a really exciting idea. And, you know, I'm hoping here in the future to have the opportunity to reach out to that individual and you know, see what he thinks about operating similar businesses in Petersburg and if that would be viable. But anyway, I'll keep it at that. It's the end of a long meeting, and I'm sure everybody's excited about calling it a day.
Thanks for that update, Member Fine Walsh. That's awesome. Recognitions. Member Tremblay.
Thank you. A preemptive thank you to the Medical Center and Public Health for the booster clinic happening this Friday. No appointments needed. It's just alphabetized by last name hours that you can go in, and the radio is reading the details, so I won't get into it. But I like to spend the week of equinox getting ready for winter and having a healthy, fun winter. And for me, involves the booster. So I just wanted to make sure that was on everyone's radar.
Member Tremblay. I would briefly recognize our Petersburg School District as I would say the hopefully overwhelming majority of us know we are extraordinarily lucky to have a talented and robust public education system here. I'm happy to see the kids back in school and witness at kid drop-off the enthusiasm of teachers and administrators. And so a huge thank you to all of them in the district. Member Mucci, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank all the people who were involved in getting the fire department head hired. It was kind of a clunky process. I think a lot of people were frustrated from time to time, but I think we're at a good spot here, and I'm very happy with the way it went, and I'm very thankful for all the people that worked to make it happen. I just wanted to say thank you. It's great.
None. Any further recognitions? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Adjourn. Nice work, everybody.